Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunati Ravanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Girirari Radha Girirari Shri Radhe Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Shri Radhe Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivraj Jaya Ashta Tarshara Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jaya Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivraj Jaya Ashta Tarshara Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jaya Ananta Koti Vaishnava Ki Jaya Nitai Ghora Premanandi. Okay, so start by the usual Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 4, Chapter 12, entitled Dhruva Maharaj Goes Back to Godhead, and it is text 51 with quite a long purport. So let's begin. Jnanam agyata tattvaya yodhad yat satpate mitam Kripalo dhinanathasya devastasya nugrimate. Jnanam, knowledge, agyata tattvaya, to those who are unaware of the truth. Ya, one who, tadyat, imparts, satpate, on the path of truth, amritam, immortality, kripalo, kind, dhinanathasya, protector of the poor, deva, the demigods, tasya, to him, anugrinate, give blessings. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The narration of Dhruva Maharaj is sublime knowledge for the attainment of immortality. Persons unaware of the absolute truth can be led to the path of truth. Those who, out of transcendental kindness, take on the responsibility of becoming master protectors of the poor living entities automatically gain the interest and blessings of the demigods. Purport: Jnanam agyata means knowledge which is unknown almost throughout the entire world. No one knows actually what is the absolute truth. Materialists are very proud of their advancement in education, in philosophical speculation, and in scientific knowledge. But no one actually knows what the absolute truth is. The great sage Maitreya therefore recommends that to enlighten people about the absolute truth, tattva, devotees should preach the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam throughout the entire world. Srila Vyasadeva especially compiled this great literature of scientific knowledge because people are completely unaware of the absolute truth. In the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, it is said that Vyasadeva, the learned sage, compiled this great Bhagavat Purana just to stop the ignorance of the mass of people. Because people do not know the absolute truth, the Srimad Bhagavatam was specifically compiled by Vyasadeva under the instruction of Narada. Generally, even though people are interested in understanding the truth, they take to speculation and reach at most the conception of impersonal Brahman. But very few men actually know the personality of Godhead. Recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam is specifically meant to enlighten people about the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although there is no fundamental difference between impersonal Brahman, localized Param Atma, and the Supreme Person, factual immortality cannot be attained unless and until one attains the stage of associating with the Supreme Person. Devotional service which leads to the association of the Supreme Lord is actual immortality. Pure devotees, out of compassion for the fallen souls, are kripalu, very kind to people in general. They distribute this Bhagavat knowledge all over the world. A kind-hearted devotee is called Dinanatha, protector of the poor, ignorant mass of people. Lord Krishna is also known as Dinanatha or Dinabandhu, the master or actual friend of the poor living entities. And his pure devotee also takes the same position of Dinanatha. The Dinanathas, or devotees of Lord Krishna who preach the path of devotional service, become the favorites of the demigods. Generally, people are interested in worshipping the demigods, especially Lord Shiva, in order to obtain material benefits. But a pure devotee who engages in preaching the principles of devotional service as prescribed in the Srimad Bhagavatam does not need to separately worship the demigods. The demigods are automatically pleased with him and offer all blessings within their capacity. As by watering the root of a tree, the leaves and branches are automatically watered, so by executing pure devotional service to the Lord, the branches, twigs, and leaves of the Lord, known as the demigods, are automatically pleased with the devotee and they offer all benedictions. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Meganatimidandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmanitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I'll have to admit that I'm a little bit unprepared to speak this morning, but I have noticed that speaking on this forum, which the devotees have very nicely organized, then often I hear myself speaking in such a way that I'm not usually able to speak, and the only reason that I can think of is because there's a strong desire from the devotees listening to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. So I'm hopeful that in your presence, then I can say something which is inspirational or will motivate us to engage in Krishna's service. So with your blessings, then we will again repeat the translation and try to share some realizations on Srila Prabhupada's purport. The narration of Dhruva Maharaj is sublime knowledge for the attainment of immortality. Persons unaware of the absolute truth can be led to the path of truth. Those who, out of transcendental kindness, take on the responsibility of becoming master protectors of the poor living entities, automatically gain the interest and blessings of the demigods. So what first comes to mind reading this purport and the translation by Srila Prabhupada is that it appears to be very much in line with his mission in this material world. How it is that we hear Srila Prabhupada came to this world to write his books. I believe it's given in a memory by one of Srila Prabhupada's disciples. It may have been actually Bhavananda Prabhu. Perhaps someone can correct me if I'm wrong or give the source at the end of the class, where Srila Prabhupada described how he had a discussion with Krishna. Krishna wanted him to come to this material world, and Srila Prabhupada didn't want to come. But Krishna told him that you just go there and write these books and everything will be okay. So we know that Srila Prabhupada, his mission was to come to the Western world, Paschatya Deshatarane, and free those people from the conceptions of personalism and voidism. And how he's done this is primarily through his Srimad Bhagavatam, which he's given to us. And he did that based on, of course, the orders of his own spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. So we hear how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, he instructed Srila Prabhupada at Radhakund that if you ever get money, then you should print books. So Srila Prabhupada took this very seriously. Of course, he'd also been instructed that he should teach the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Western world. That he was, when Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj first saw him, he said, "You're a young, educated man. You should travel to the English-speaking countries and spread the message of Lord Chaitanya." So these two things, and he put together these two instructions and was always endeavoring to fulfill them, and then came to the Western world with his Bhagavatam, and then continued to write and translate Srimad Bhagavatam for the benefit of all living entities. So this purport today, it's very much in line with that mission of Srila Prabhupada, and I get the impression that that's why it's quite a lengthy. It's not actually. It's only really one page of the book that I'm reading, but still, it's quite a long purport, and there's a lot of really nice points that are mentioned. The point that first comes to mind is that we hear Prabhupada explaining that this Bhagavatam, Srila Vyasadeva, he wrote it based on the instruction of Narada Muni. So this is an important point for us to understand and contemplate, that it's not that Vyasadeva or that he just decided that it was a good thing to do, but it came through the order of his spiritual master. And we know that the spiritual master's order is to be considered the order of the Supreme Personality of God. As we sing every morning, Sakshad Haritena Samasta Sastra Uttastata Bhavyata Eva Sadvi Kintu Prapurya Priya Evatasya Vande Guru Shri Charan Aravindam. So the spiritual master, he's like the via medium of Krishna, Sakshat Hari. So he is to be considered non-different in the sense that he is simply relaying the desire and the message of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it was the desire of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that the Srimad Bhagavatam is given to the world and given through Vyasadeva. So Vyasadeva became the instrument of his spiritual master Narada Muni to present this Srimad Bhagavatam. So we can understand then the importance of hearing the orders of the spiritual master and trying to fulfill them. So it's often said, well, actually I'd heard this explained, one brahmachari who's now living in, he's moved back to India, but he once told me how, yes, we hear how the spiritual master, he's the external representative of the super soul. Excuse me. And before a devotee starts practicing Krishna consciousness, then he had this personal realization that before we start practicing Krishna consciousness, then the super soul is actually quite loud. within the heart of the living entity, but due to ignorance, we can't hear the good instruction and good advice of the Supersoul. We hear, I believe it's the Upanishads, give the example that there are two birds sitting in a tree, and one bird is trying to eat the fruits of the tree, and the other bird is trying to convince them otherwise. So the soul in this material world is trying to eat the fruits of sense gratification, and the Supersoul sitting next to him in the core of the heart is trying to convince him otherwise, to come back to the spiritual world where he can actually be happy. So we're trying in material life to enjoy sense gratification, but the Supersoul is always trying to nudge us back towards the spiritual abode and to not become implicated more and more in this material world. It reminds me of when I was younger, my father used to read me something called Tintin, the comic book. So as a kid, then Krishna's designed things in such a way that we like to hear stories. So therefore, if you grew up in a pious family, then you would hear stories of Ramayana, stories of Mahabharata, stories of Srimad Bhagavatam, and the Puranas. In the Western world, then we get Batman and Tintin and all of these other less important or not important at all literatures. So in this book, Tintin, then the main character, his name is Tintin, and he had this dog who was like his best companion. And the dog would often get into situations where he had to make a particular decision, and in the comic book, then it would show a picture of the dog's name was Snowy, and on either side there was a Snowy, on either side of his shoulder there was one Snowy with devil horns, and on the other side there was a Snowy with a halo. So the idea was that Snowy was always conflicted between, should I do the right thing or should I do the bad thing? So even non-devotees, they have this understanding that there's some sort of voice within us, which is always trying to encourage us to do the right thing. But due to our conditioning and our association with the material world and the objects of sense gratification, then instead of doing the right thing that the Supersoul is always encouraging us to do, then we have the option to choose the wrong thing, which is going to implicate us more and more in material existence. So we may have had experience of this actually before coming to Krishna consciousness in a very profound way. A lot of devotees have this very strong experience before they meet the devotees, where the Supersoul is almost like it's screaming out to them. But for myself, I remember when I first went to what's called the Bhakti Lounge. For those of you who live in Auckland, it's the equivalent of the Loft, but it's in Wellington. So for those of you who are unaware, the Loft and the Bhakti Lounge, they're like outreach centers specifically designed for Western persons who, because of cultural barriers, they may not go to a temple. So these centers are designed in such a way that Western people can feel comfortable coming to do some yoga or some meditation, and then afterwards they sit with what appears to be just the general public, but actually there's devotees mixed in amongst the crowd, and they get an opportunity to take prasadam and associate with devotees, and later on in the evening there's kirtans and things. So when I first was walking up the stairs, then I could hear the kirtan going on, and as I was about to go in the door, I thought, no, this is not me. I don't know who these people are. It all seems a bit strange, the music and the drumming and the chanting, and it's just not me. I'm not going to go in there. So I was walking down the stairs to go back to my flat. And I remember very clearly as I was opening the door to go out, this very strong urge from within, almost like a very strong voice saying, just go upstairs, just stop being so mental. Just go upstairs and see what it's like. What else are you going to do tonight? You're just going to go back and do the same thing you always do, frustrated, trying to satisfy your senses. So just go upstairs. So the Supersoul, especially if we have an inclination towards Krishna or we've done some previous devotional service, then he will push us towards the devotees. And then when we come in contact with the devotees and we come in contact with the spiritual master, then the spiritual master becomes that external representative of the super soul, and then guides us to the point that we can actually consciously hear and distinguish between the mind and the instructions of the super soul. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvikam didhami bhuri yogam tam yenamam payantite. So famously, Krishna explains that for those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, then I'll give you the understanding by which you can come to me. So the spiritual master, he will engage us in devotional service in such a way that we gradually come to this platform of constant engagement in Krishna's service with priti, with love and affection. And by that, then we become qualified to again hear directly from the super soul and will act on his instructions. But in order to get there, then the spiritual master has to engage us in a way that's comfortable for us according to our nature, especially in the beginning. We may not be willing to do anything and everything for Krishna, but there may be some things that that's very natural for us and we'll be inclined towards doing. So the spiritual master will encourage us to take up a particular service. If we're an artist, we may be instructed to paint for Krishna. If we are a cook, we may be instructed to cook for Krishna. So many services one can do for Krishna, and the spiritual master will engage us accordingly. And it may not be necessarily the thing that we want to do all of the time, but that's why the spiritual master is important, because if we just follow our own mind, then we'll never become Krishna conscious. We need the purified mind of the spiritual master, the purified intelligence of the spiritual master to guide us. So for in my own example, then when I first joined the Brahmacharya ashram, I spent a year or two doing full-time book distribution. And it was definitely pleasurable in certain circumstances, but also a struggle. And my book scores were not, I was never a very big book distributor. So I was then told that it was obvious that I should join the catering team, because for practical managemental reasons, we have to obviously have some Lakshmi to maintain the ashram. So then those who are not productive on book distribution, then it's practical for them to be engaged in catering and distributing prasadam at the university. So I remember at a certain point in time, I bring this up with my spiritual master, and I said, I was saying, Gurudev, I want to be full-time book distributor. And he said, well, why is that? And I said, because it's the best service. So actually I didn't really have any, in one sense, my desire was not very pure at all. I just thought I want to be the best devotee and do the best thing. It was my misconception, or maybe not misconception, but a little bit immature understanding. And my spiritual master looked at me, smiled, and said, the best service is the service that Krishna wants you to do. So the best service is the service that Krishna wants us to do. Because yes, it is very important that Srila Prabhupada's books are distributed to the mass of people. But in order for that to happen, then all the devotees have to cooperate and give their unique offering to Krishna. So we can't all just stand on the street and give books to people. We can all do that, but not necessarily full time. Because we need a whole society. We need temples, we need farm communities, we need schools, we need grihastas, we need brahmacharis, we need vanaprasthas, we need sannyasis. We need everything. We need a whole society in order to attract people to the society where they can then hear Srila Prabhupada through his books, and by studying them become steady in their Krishna consciousness. So the whole package is required, not just one aspect. of the whole package, but actually all the devotees together, they make up the whole, um, they make up the book distribution by all of their efforts. I remember one time His Holiness Aravinda Swami came to visit the temple here in Auckland, and Shishi Radhagiri Dari were there on the altar, dressed very beautifully, extraordinarily beautifully. And he remarked before giving Bhagavatam class that yes, to come to the temple and to see the deities makes the austerities of urban outreach, it diminishes those austerities. So he was thanking the pujaris for their service, addressing the deities so nicely. So it's a every devotee's offering counts, and the spiritual master, he has to engage us accordingly. And if we're engaged according to our nature and we become steady in our service, then as Srila Prabhupada writes in purport to, forget which text and now, of the 5th chapter, he explains that when one becomes steady in their service, then they become qualified to feel the presence of the Lord in their particular sphere of activities. So just by doing the service that the spiritual master asks us to do, then we'll gradually begin to perceive how actually we're just an instrument in Krishna's hands. It's not necessarily that we have any real talent or ability, but that actually this talent and ability is coming from Krishna. I had the good fortune to spend some time with young devotee Prahlad Prabhu, the son of Kadamba Kanana Prabhu, and I was appreciating his mridanga playing on a particular day, Srila Prabhupada's appearance day, which was not so long ago. And I said how I'd never seen you play like that before. And he was saying to me, yeah, he just honestly, without any hesitation, he just said, yeah, it was Srila Prabhupada's mercy on that particular day. He said, I was thinking when I was playing, I don't usually play like this. So I was thinking, yeah, this is the realization that we want to have as devotees, that actually we engage in Krishna's service according to our nature. And gradually we'll see how actually we're just an instrument in Krishna's hands. And this is the realization that we want to get, because in all circumstances, we're an instrument whether we like it or not. We're either an instrument for the material energy, which is very dissatisfying and very frustrating, or we become an instrument for the service of Krishna. So as Krishna explained to Arjuna that actually all of these men, all of the Pandavas, not the Pandavas, all of the Kauravas, all of these personalities on the battlefield, they're actually already been put to death by my arrangement. But you, O Sabyasachi, can simply become an instrument in the fight. Touch Trinu, just become an instrument. So this is a point that my own spiritual master, His Holiness Devamrita Maharaj, he likes to mention, that when we read Chaitanya Charitamrita, we hear Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explaining that actually this material world has already been flooded with love for Krishna. When you read it, it's there multiple times. You can't avoid it in Chaitanya Charitamrita, and you're thinking, this seems a little bit inconceivable to me. When I look outside, I don't see people being flooded with love of God. At least that's my mundane vision. But Krishnadas Kaviraj's vision is something completely different. So actually, the will of Krishna is that everyone in this material universe becomes flooded with drowns in love for Krishna. So that's the desire of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we can't ignore that or disregard that or think that that's not going to happen. But it's simply a matter of time that separates that from happening. So the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is going to happen. But the question is whether or not we're going to become instrumental in helping to fulfill that will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just as Arjuna, it was up to him whether he wanted to become an instrument in the fight of the Battle of Kurukshetra. So we also have this opportunity. The Srimad Bhagavatam will be spread all over the material universe, all over planet Earth, all over the material universe. But whether we want to be an instrument and then receive some credit from Krishna, get some recognition from Krishna for trying to assist in our tiny little way, but Krishna appreciates that. So that's his mercy upon us, that he gives us an opportunity to become an instrument. Just like Vishnu Jan Maharaj, there's a video you can see actually of his life, but within that small 20-minute video, then there's a section there where he asks Srila Prabhupada, he says, Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktivinoda Thakur left this world, and he said that he was leaving this world with his mission unfinished, with his business unfinished. And Srila Prabhupada said, yes, this is his mercy. He is Vaishnava, he is all-powerful. He could have automatically fulfilled the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But this is his mercy that he has given us an opportunity to actually to finish that business. So now let us finish that business. So in other words, then it's the mercy of the previous acharyas that they're giving us an opportunity to spread Krishna consciousness, even though our abilities may not be so great, or our capacity may not be so big. Whatever small way we can assist Srila Prabhupada, then we get that credit from Krishna. Krishna sees that, oh, this devotee is endeavoring so nicely according to his or her position to engage in Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. So just as we're reading here, then Vyasadeva, he also is instrumental in the will of the Supreme. By listening to his spiritual master, Narada Muni, then he is now engaged in writing Srimad Bhagavatam and for the benefit of all living entities. So in the same way, we also want to listen to the orders of the spiritual master, which in the beginning may just be chanting 16 rounds and following the 4 regulative principles, which is actually not a very small thing to do that for your whole life. It's actually a very significant thing. But it may not be, his instructions may not be so specific, but if we follow those, then gradually the instruction will become more and more refined and specific. So we may not be asked to, divide the 4 Vedas and compile the cream of the Vedas into Srimad Bhagavatam, but we will get an opportunity in some way, shape, or form to assist in spreading Krishna consciousness. So how did this happen? How was it that Vyasadeva, he got given this opportunity? We hear how Vyasadeva, this is his first canto, I think, 4th chapter, the appearance of Narada Muni. Then it's described how Vyasadeva, actually the sages of Naimisharanya, they're questioning Sutta Goswami about, how, where did this come from? Why did Dvaipayana Vyas write this down, etc. So Sutta Goswami, then he explains how Vyasadeva, once he was sitting on his in the Himalayas in his hermitage, Badrikashram, I believe, he'd just taken his bath in the river Saraswati and performed his morning ablutions, and then he began to see what the Bhagavatam describes as anomalies in the world around him, and he could see that Kali Yuga is approaching just by seeing symptoms in the atmosphere. It reminds me that I grew up in outside of Dunedin in a big farm land. I always grew up on farms, although my parents weren't farmers. My dad just liked to live in that situation. So there was a saying that I often heard as a kid, red sky at night is shepherd's delight, and red sky in the morning is shepherd's warning. So in other words, the farmers, the shepherds, they had this ability to see that red sky at night means that it's going to be a sunny day tomorrow, and red sky in the morning means it's a warning that it's going to rain. So even people in Kali Yuga have their ability to some degree to read the environment around them and see how things are going to play out in the future. So extraordinarily empowered, Vyasadeva, he could see how Kali Yuga was coming. So he began to contemplate, how can I give benefit to the people of this age who are going to be impatient due to a lack of goodness. And we also hear all the different symptoms of the age of Kali. So he was thinking, how can I benefit these people? They don't have the patience to read the one Veda. So he decided that, okay, I'll divide the Vedas into four. And he, of course, wrote Mahabharata and these different literatures. And then he entrusted them to his different disciples. I forget exactly who now, Jaimini Rishi, I think is one of them. Sutta Goswami's father, Brahmaharshan Sutta, is another one of them. And then, although after doing all of this, we hear how he still felt despondent. He felt some dissatisfaction within his heart. So then he began to consider, why is this? I've done this, I've done that. Maybe it's because I haven't sufficiently glorified Krishna. And right as he was thinking this, then Radha Narada Muni appeared on the scene, right at the perfect time. And he said to Vyasadeva, are you satisfied with identifying with the self, with the body and the mind as being the self? In other words, you shouldn't be feeling despondent. You're a great personality. Why are you lamenting? And then he confirmed Vyasadeva's internal thoughts by explaining that yes, you've emphasized Artha Dharma Karma Moksha, but you haven't sufficiently glorified the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the process of devotional service. So I'm actually reading this, but this is where I'm currently reading in Bhagavatam. I just started reading it again. And I'm just in this particular section by chance. And there's a purport there that's very much stood out to me. Srila Prabhupada explains that Vyasadeva, he actually could understand that devotional service is superior to Artha Dharma Karma Moksha. But then he had actually, Prabhupada, the way that he puts it, he had improperly used his time emphasizing these things, and therefore he felt despondent because his time was supposed to be properly used by emphasizing devotional service to Krishna. So I thought this was a very important point that we can all learn from, that when we feel despondent in life, when we feel dissatisfied in life, it's because of our overemphasis of something other than Krishna's service and service to Krishna. It's the way that he put it specifically, improperly using his valuable time. He says his valuable time. So we know that this human form of life is a limited time, at best 100 years. But for most of us, it's probably more like at best 70 years. So that's a short time. I'm just thinking my own life. I'm 28, and it feels like just the other day I was 18, so it goes very quick. I'm sure the older members of the audience would agree with that. As time goes on, then as we get older, time gets faster and faster. So we feel when we're in our teenage years, especially, we feel that life is just, the world is our oyster, as the saying goes in the Western world, that life is just this thing that's just we're always going to be able to just go out there and get whatever we want, whenever we want. But no, actually, our stay on this material world, in this life, is very, very brief. It's practically the blink of an eye. So our time is extremely valuable because this human form of life is the opportunity to go back to Godhead. And we need to use it properly so that we can achieve that goal. Because we've wasted so much time. That was one thing I was realizing spending time with this devotee, Prahlad, having grown up in a Vaishnava family. Then I was thinking, oh, he's only 15 and he reads Bhagavatam every day, chants 16 rounds. So seems to be so focused on thinking of Krishna. What was I doing when I was 15? Wasting so much time playing video games, doing all kinds of things that I won't mention. So what as Narottam Das Thakur explains, and I've spent my life uselessly, um, simply drinking poison by not having worshipped Radha and Krishna. So we've already, for most of us, we're not advanced enough to have taken birth in the family of a Vaishnava. Then we can see we've already spent so much time wasted in the material energy. So this human form of life that we have now, this opportunity we have now, understanding the purpose of life, we should be eager to engage it, engage our time wisely, and how to do that in such a way that we don't become despondent. We can learn from Vyasadeva to um, rather spend that time in sense gratification, economic development, uh, the benefits of religiosity and liberation, meaning desire to be free from distress. Rather than emphasizing these things and striving for these things in life, we should strive for devotional service to Krishna. Of course, at the same time, we can't be fanatical or unrealistic. We are, as it's often said, spirit souls having a human experience. So we may not be able to just jump to the transcendental platform and just do anything and everything for Krishna. So therefore, as I was explaining before, the spiritual master will often give us something which is very natural for us to do, some service which is natural for us. And gradually we'll come to the point where we're happy to do anything and everything for Krishna, because we'll realize that actually the taste of serving Krishna is so much more satisfying than the taste of trying to just satisfy my senses. This is the whole reason why the Varnashram Dharma system is set up. That yes, if you like, you can have your griha, you can have your family, you can have your friends, you can have your sense gratification, you can have all of these things. But gradually one will naturally become disgusted with sense gratification, especially if they're engaged in devotional service. And you see this example in the Bhagavatam in many places. In our Bhagavatam class in the Brahmacharya ashram, we've just finished the chapter, we're just reading the 9th canto, and we've just finished hearing about King Yayati. And actually, Yayati, he kind of gets, in one sense, a bit of a bad rap, because, you think like, oh, foolish. He got involved with Sharmishta after hearing from Shukracharya, the father of Devayani, that he shouldn't. For those who maybe not so familiar with the pastime or have forgotten a little bit about it, then basically, in a very short way, King Yayati, he was married to a Brahmana girl whose name is Devayani. Her father is Shukracharya. And Devayani had a best friend who she was a little bit, they had some rivalry between one another. And her name was Sharmishta. So Sharmishta was, by providence, arranged to become the maidservant of Devayani. Devayani was very happy about this. And Shukracharya, he warned King Yayati, don't get involved with Sharmishta. If you do this, then it's not going to be good. So King Yayati, he heard this instruction, but he was approached by Sharmishta for purpose of sex, so that she could also have children like Devayani. And he considered the words of Shukracharya, and he was thinking, yeah, I probably shouldn't do this, but at the same time, I'm a king and it's my duty to give shelter to someone who approaches me. I'm a Kshatriya. So he engaged in sex life with this girl, Sharmishta, and Devayani became very upset at this. So then she approached her father, Shukracharya, who came before King Yayati and said, you fool, I told you not to do this. Now I curse you that you will become an old man and you'll have to give up your youth, which you're misusing by engaging unnecessarily in sense gratification, sex life. So King Yayati was very disturbed at hearing this. And as we know, we may remember, he approached his sons to try and offload this burden of old age so that he could get their youth, so that he could continue enjoying sense gratification. So the reason why I bring this up is because he did exchange his youth, and he did enjoy sense gratification for a long period of time, for thousands of years. But all the while he was thinking, how can he actually, his mind began to consider, I want to become an eternal servant of Krishna. And gradually he actually became disgusted with himself and how he had acted, and how out of lust he had given up his old age and given it to one of his sons. So he began to then consider, yes, how can I become a devotee? So then we hear he gives the he-goat, she-goat analogy in the next chapter. But the point that I wanted to focus on was that it's natural for anyone engaged in sense gratification that eventually they just become disgusted with it. But for the non-devotee, they have no opportunity, they have no other option, no higher knowledge of anything else. So they become disgusted with one form of sense gratification, and then they just move on to another. In the Western world, by the time you're 21, you've basically done everything you can do. So then you just go traveling with the hope that you can do the same sense gratification in a different part of the world. So there's an interesting point brought up in this pastime. Yadu, the first son of Yayati, when he's asked by his father to receive his old age, then he says to his father, well, he's thinking actually, no, I can't, because I want this youth so that I can go through and fulfill my desires and become frustrated with them, so that later on I can attain renunciation and I can actually become a very serious devotee. So there's also another reason that's given in this purport. Srila Prabhupada, he mentions that first, and then he says, so therefore the general process is brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyas. That one spends their youth, grihastha ashram, of course, primarily at first brahmacharya ashram, but a certain portion of their life, the early years of their life in the grihastha ashram, fulfilling their desires, and then realizing the reality of them, and then actually being able to genuinely attain renunciation. So there is also another reason Yadu, he wanted to not take his father's old age, because he also knew that he was going to be the head of the dynasty in which Krishna would appear, so he needed to have children. So that's another reason, but that reason is given that he wanted to genuinely attain renunciation by going through what he felt he needed to go through. So as devotees, yes, we want to we don't want to become despondent by wasting our life on sense gratification or unnecessary things. But at the same time, we may experience that we're not ready to completely act in a transcendental way. So we may need to act in a more human way while cultivating Krishna consciousness, and gradually give up our desires for this material world, and then actually genuinely attain renunciation later on in life, rather than trying to prematurely attain renunciation and actually become frustrated and fall down from our position as being a devotee, as Krishna explains. Then for one who meditates upon the objects of the senses, but pretends as though he's not attached to them, actually he deludes himself and is called a pretender. So better that we're honest, and we make gradual advancement back to the spiritual world. And so therefore, that's again why the orders of the spiritual master, the instructions of the spiritual master are so important, because he can see what's actually the best way for us to be engaged according to our nature, according to our advancement, how we can gradually make process back to the spiritual world. You see so many times how Prabhupada says, especially even in Bhagavad Gita, he says the gradual process of Krishna consciousness. He also says the slow process of Krishna consciousness. So for most of us, then we'll be in that boat unless we're here for a brief time, just finishing up our business from our previous lives. But for most of us, it will be gradual elevation to the spiritual world, which is actually a very quick thing, really, in Kali Yuga. It's 100, or not even that. It's Prabhupada says in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, any man who has 50 years ahead of him should take this very seriously. So actually, it's only really 50 years one can become practically perfect if they follow perfectly the instructions of the spiritual master. So we want to become Dinanath, as it's said in this purport. Lord Krishna is also, pure devotees out of compassion for the fallen souls are Kripalu, very kind people in general. They distribute this Bhagavat knowledge all over the world. A kind-hearted devotee is called Dinanath, protector of the poor, ignorant, massive people. Lord Krishna is also known as Dinanath or Dinabandhu, the master or actual friend of the poor living entities. This pure devotee also takes the same position of Dinanath. The Dinanaths or devotees of Lord Krishna who preach the path of devotional service become favorites of the demigods. So yeah, we want to try our best according to our capacity to somehow arrange that we can give Srimad Bhagavatam to others. That may be just by giving some prasadam to someone, making a friendship with them at work or at school, and then encouraging them to somehow come into the association of the devotees and just hear. They don't have to surrender immediately, or they don't have to take necessarily Srimad Bhagavatam immediately, but just get them to develop a connection with Krishna in some way, shape, or form. So all of us have the opportunity to do that, whatever our service is. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has explained, that wherever you go, whomever you meet, teach them the science of Krishna. So we'll stop there and ask if there's any questions or comments. Hare Krishna, thank you for your kind attention.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for the wonderful class. I mean, you've highlighted a very key point, which is that any form of devotional service, one has to be guided by a spiritual master. And if a disciple takes the spiritual master's words very seriously, then I believe that simply by meditating upon the spiritual master's instructions, they can become perfect, which is the secret to of success in our spiritual life. And I just wanted to add one point. When you're mentioning about following a spiritual master's instructions, recalled about this text I was reading by Srila Viswanath Chakravarti Thakur while he was explaining a verse in Bhagavad Gita 2.41, that the order of the spiritual master is the life substance of the disciple. There is nothing else for the disciple to do but just follow the spiritual master's instructions. And the disciple should not consider whether he's going back home, back to Godhead. His first business is just to execute the order of the spiritual master. So a disciple should always just meditate on the order of the spiritual master, and he meditate upon that order, but also find the means by which he can perfectly worship and execute it. So thank you for sharing with us about your incidents with your spiritual master, but your service in terms of book distribution and cooking. So I guess the service is perfect when the spiritual master actually instructs you to execute it, and you do it enthusiastically and with determination. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yeah. Already Mataji explained that the true picture of your service. So not much to say about it, but yes, good luck to you. And you have started your service under the instruction of your spiritual master, and you are quite doing it very well. It shows from your explanation how you are devoted to participate in the book distribution and in cooking. So it shows that these examples helps us following the instruction of spiritual master, that what we all need to be in our life to progress in devotional service. Just follow the instruction of spiritual master and just keep going. The result will automatically follow. We don't need to wait for the result, as Mataji explained under this 241, as Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explained. We don't need to wait for the result. Result will automatically follow. Just keep doing the service under the instruction of individual spiritual master, and then everything will fall in place. Thank you so much for enlightening your personal experience and explaining the text so nicely. Thank you so much for me.
Prabhu, can I ask your name?
Yeah, Tushta Chaitanya.
Tushta Chaitanya. Yeah, thank you. I always look forward to hearing from you at the end of each class. So thank you, Prabhu, for your
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
to hear and chant Srimad Bhagavatam.
Prabhu, just one question, a quick question. So how does one, because the onslaughts of the material existence is really getting worse as we progress in Kali Yuga, but how does one actually perform the instructions of the spiritual master with enthusiasm on a daily basis? Because we always have our ups and downs, right? So maybe you can share with your personal experience or your realizations, like how do we keep the momentum of enthusiasm and determination on a daily basis to execute it?
Well, I'm certainly just yesterday I was thinking, wow, I'm really struggling to. I was trying to chant my rounds. I was thinking, amazing how powerful the mind is. Although trying for some time to do this, still it's not a cheap thing to become steady in Krishna's service, and steady in determination. So my answer will be limited because I don't have much realization about it. Perhaps someone else can answer, but what I have heard and what I do try to take shelter in is, my own spiritual master. He's often explained that love begins with duty consciousness. So although we don't feel like it, we out of duty perform our devotional service. And automatically then the enthusiasm may come, even though we don't feel like it. So many circumstances, practically every year before the end of the marathon, I'm thinking, I don't want to do this, Krishna, but I just, because of the good association of other devotees, then I do it. And definitely there's a lot of points throughout the marathon where I'm thinking, this is the best thing I could be doing. You feel like you're liberated, because somehow or another by devotional service, your mind becomes purified, and you realize that actually there is nothing better than this. And the pastime of Bhishma Dev when he's passing away, then there's an amazing purport I read recently there where Srila Prabhupada explains that a devotee, he feels most happy when he's completely dependent upon Krishna. So when we're put into a situation where we feel complete dependence upon Krishna, then actually we feel most happy and most satisfied. But our tendency in material life is that we don't want to be dependent upon anyone. We want to think ourselves completely independent, and to feel dependent upon someone else, it's it's kind of a scary situation to be put in. So the more that we realize that actually no happiness comes from being completely dependent on Krishna in all circumstances, as he explains in 18th chapter, forget the Sanskrit now, and all activities just depend upon me. Always work under my protection, such devotional service, be fully conscious of me. So we may not be in that state of consciousness straight away, but by performing, by our love for Krishna is shown by our duty consciousness. So we're conscious of our duty and we try to perform that, which is chanting our 16 rounds, following the 4 regular principles, and trying our best to, out of duty, do those activities. So we're in the recuperatory stage for most of us, and then that leads to the relishing stage, just like Nalini Kanta Prabhu, he's a doctor, and also I just found out Kadamba Kanana Prabhu is also a doctor. So they have patients who are in their recuperatory stage, recovering. They can't just give them, whatever food they want whenever they like. They have to follow a certain diet. They have to follow rules and regulations, although they may not feel like it, but out of duty they do that, and then gradually they come to the point where they can again relish whatever prasad and whatever food they want. So we're in the beginning stage where we may be in the beginning stage where we have to perform Krishna consciousness out of duty, even though we don't feel like it. We may not be at the relishing stage yet, but by doing that, then we'll come to the point of the relishing stage where Krishna consciousness is blissful, no matter where we are or what we're doing. Maybe we've run out of time. I just saw the time then, but perhaps someone else has touched it. Chaitanya Prabhu, maybe you have something you want to add.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you. This is what Mataji was stressing. The point is about how we feel distress while doing this, chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra every morning. Sometimes we get distorted by the surroundings, whatever happenings are at home. So just concentrate on concentration. If you keep doing the japa, and slowly and steadily it will subsides the anxieties, and if come into this motion of relishing the chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and that is how it keeps you on track. So that is the only way. You just keep going, no matter the distraction comes around. Only just focus on the chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra. It will subside all the external pull we feel every day, losing our enthusiasm. It will pull back into the same motion as we used to have. And Srila Prabhupada used to often give these examples, no matter what the situations around. Just keep doing the chanting nicely and loudly, and that will purify your all anxieties around. And you can be on the line quickly.
Thank you, Prabhu.
So we just ask whether any other devotees have any comments, realizations to share. If not, we will bring the class to a close. Thank you so much, Prabhu, for your time.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Vancha kalpatrupyascha
Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
His Grace Aravinda Nabha
Jai.
Jai.
Praise to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you. Hare Krishna.